Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to register and attend today's AWS Online Tech Talk, Cloud Financial Management, How Small Changes Can Accelerate Value Realization. My name is Levant Stepanian, and joining me this morning are Owen Rogers, Research Director in the Digital Economics Unit at 451 Research, which is now part of S&P Global, and Keith Jared, Senior Product Marketing Manager for AWS Cost Management Services. Owen, Keith, would you guys like to take a minute to introduce yourselves?
Great, thanks, Levant. Good to be here. So, as you said, I'm the Research Director for the Digital Economics Unit at 451 Research, and it's my job to understand the challenges and complexities enterprises face in using cloud and to help them derive benefits by using it in the optimum way. I used to be a product manager in the hosting and cloud industry. I decided to do a PhD in the economics of cloud, and I joined 451 Research about 7 years ago, and we were acquired by S&P Global Market Intelligence back in December. So great to be here.
Great, thanks, Levon. Hey folks, my name is Keith Jarrett. I lead product marketing and business intelligence for Cloud Financial Management Services. I've been with AWS for a little over 6 years in various cloud economics and pricing related roles, and I'm excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. As for myself, I've been with AWS for a little over 2 years, and I'm a member of the AWS Cloud Economics team. As a team, we work closely with our customers throughout their cloud journey, helping them quantify business value of using AWS, and my specific focus area, which is helping customers accelerate value realization by helping them implement cloud financial management best practices. In today's webinar, we'll share why digital transformations require a shift and evolution in financial management processes, how we believe organizations should adapt, and what AWS solutions are available to help. We're also excited to have Owen join us today to share findings from a recent 451 research study called Cloud Financial Management, Small Changes Can Make Big Impacts, which examines how AWS customers are implementing cloud financial management and the value they're realizing as a result. We want to make sure today's conversation is useful for you, so we have some time at the end of today's session for Q&A, but feel free to raise any questions throughout the session as well. Before we dive into the study results, let's situate ourselves. Today's business leaders are in a digital transformation race to move quicker, innovate more, and remain competitive. While this transformation is often marked by technology advancements, its effects ripple across organizations and processes that impact both what we do and how and why we do it. From a finance and procurement perspective, the process for things like budgeting, requesting, approving, procuring, and installing physical infrastructure is one that has been learned over decades. It starts with engineering or IT teams typically requesting, various finance teams acting as approvers and procurers, and ending with operation teams that install and hand off ready-to-use infrastructure. The process, however, increases the cost of failure for finance organizations due to the long-term nature of these capital-heavy investments. Approvals and procurement cycles and operationalization activities, these also slow down experimentation and innovation for technology teams who become blocked on long pole dependencies from other siloed organizations. This is an antiquated model, and as we're going to see in the next slide, requires adjustments in order to be successful in the cloud. With the adoption of cloud, there are a number of benefits, right? Technology teams are able to innovate faster due to decreased approval and procurement and infrastructure deployment cycles. And the cost of failure that we talked about earlier, it's eliminated for finance organizations since they're just a few clicks away or API calls away from terminating cloud resources. Likewise, technology teams are no longer just builders, but operators and owners of their products, and they're responsible for most of the activities historically associated with finance and operation teams, including procurement and deployment. This is a pretty big transformation for organizations used to working in the older model. As such, we need to think about the best way customers can undergo this transformation successfully. While it is easy to think about cost as the primary concern from customers, the needs of enterprises extends well beyond how to lower your bill. Organizations have extensive financial management needs, which in part result from a fundamentally different procurement process than what organizations are used to with a heavier CapEx model. The variable nature of the cloud means that enterprises have to rethink the way they do things that have become routine in traditional IT financial management. These include how to ensure that you're tracking and tracing costs back to individual teams or projects in a standardized way, whether that involves charging back or showing back, or simply establishing a regular process for reporting and monitoring costs. Instilling oversight while at the same time enabling decentralized cost management across the entire organization, such as how to institutionalize cost consciousness into the application design process, so that we're moving away from monolithic applications toward modern designs that can scale on an as-needed basis and take advantage of cloud-native pricing. Redesigning our forecasting processes to take advantage of the latest in machine learning and predictive analytics, but also so that we're working across the organization to better understand drivers of cost and usage, whether it's new product launches or marketing campaigns or regional expansion. And finally, establishing the guardrails to ensure that we don't get surprised by any bill. This includes ensuring we have an established account strategy, have an established partnership between finance and engineering teams, and that we're investing in the people, the processes, and the technology to be successful on the cloud as we scale. Collectively, we refer to these set of capabilities and best practices as Cloud Financial Management, or CFM. I'd now like to turn it over to Owen so he can share his insights and findings from the work him and his team at 451 Research did earlier this year. Owen, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Levon. So today I'm going to be talking about some results of a survey of enterprise decision makers which sought to investigate this concept of cloud financial management. And what we discovered was that small changes can make big impacts. So 10 years ago, many commentators in industry were saying cloud would be like electricity. Small businesses, enterprises, users would be able to plug in and consume whatever technology services they wanted to use. Now, it's true, companies like being able to plug in and consume their technology, their IT without making a reservation. And they also like being able to offload elements of management. But what they don't feel is the need to dumb down. They want to meet their exact requirements while enabling scalability and improving labor efficiency. So now the situation is there's almost an abundance of power sockets, with each representing a different cloud service, variation, and region, but all consumed in an on-demand manner. So companies still like the benefit of outsourced management. They still like the benefit of on-demand. In the same way electricity is consumed in an on-demand manner, they like the on-demand ability of cloud. But they don't want to dumb down to a simple electricity plug socket. They want the flexibility to choose their precise service, choose where to host it, and choose how to use it, but they want to be able to consume it in this on-demand manner. And this has led to great complexity in the market. Now, I would argue this complexity is a good thing. If you're an enterprise building an application, you want to use the latest and greatest technologies. You want to add value to the business through innovation. And it's difficult to add value through innovation if everything is dumbed down to the lowest common denominator. But because now there are so many options in the market, it's difficult to ensure you're using the best combination and optimizing in the right way. To resolve this, a new discipline has emerged, which is cloud financial management. And cloud financial management, or CFM, combines tools, processes, and practices to manage and optimize cloud costs while letting enterprises innovate and scale. Now, crucially, this isn't about squeezing costs. It's good for a company to spend money if they're getting value from that spend. The function of CFM is to make sure that business objectives can be met and new value can be added to the business without unnecessary expense. So it's not about cutting costs so that no value is added. It's all about enabling a value to be added but while keeping costs as low as they can be. But is CFM actually useful? It sounds great in practice, but very little data existed in how practical and useful it was for companies. So AWS commissioned 451 Research to survey 500 US-based enterprise decision makers on their experiences of CFM. To ensure an unbiased study, respondents were not told the survey was being conducted for AWS, and additionally, AWS was not involved in choosing specific respondents. We did choose a profile of customer we wanted to reach, and they were AWS customers for at least a year, with spending of a minimum $100,000 per year and a minimum of 1,000 employees. And in our sample of 500 decision makers, 29 industry categories were represented. And in this deck, in this webinar today, I'm going to be taking you through some of the results from that survey. So perhaps it's no surprise that we found cloud financial management saves money. The average unit cost saving across our 500 respondents was 52%. So that means these enterprises were cutting their costs in half, and they attributed this saving just to CFM. Now, I don't think this is a particular revelation. If you're a decision maker in a company, you are tracking costs, you're visualizing them and keeping track of them, it makes sense that you're going to save money. But it was interesting that more experienced consumers actually save more money. So for those who were using AWS from 2 to 3 years, the average unit cost saving was 51%. But when we talked to those decision makers who had used AWS for 5+ years, that jumped up to 61%. So it appears the more mature you are with your use of cloud, the greater the benefit of using CFM. It was interesting that there were benefits beyond just cost. There were bigger benefits to the business, including in terms of revenue and profitability. 78% of our respondents said that the use of CFM had improved their revenue. 71% said it had improved their profitability. So it would appear that CFM isn't just reducing unnecessary expense, it's also helping the business function and grow by helping things such as revenue and profitability. And I'll come back to this point in a moment. In the same way to cost savings, we saw that enterprises that were more experienced in the use of a cloud provider actually gained greater benefits in terms of revenue and profitability. So for companies who had used AWS for 2 to 3 years, the 55% said that they had obtained a revenue benefit as a result of CFM. But talking to enterprises with 5 years or greater experience of AWS, that jumped up to a significant 78%. Similarly, for profitability, 62% said CFM had helped them grow profitability when those customers had been using AWS for 2 to 3 years. But when we looked at customers who had used AWS for 5 years plus, that shot up to 71%. We also found that CFM supports better risk management. 69% of enterprises who had used AWS for 5 years or greater said that they had achieved better overall business risk management. They'd reduced their level of risk as a result of CFM. So why are we seeing this trend? First of all, why are we seeing that enterprises who are more experienced in using AWS are making greater savings? And secondly, why are we seeing benefits to things such as revenue and profitability, not just cost savings? Well, these charts, I think, reveal some of the picture. So we found correlation between the use of tools for cloud financial management with customers who were more mature. So essentially, customers who had used AWS for 5 years plus, we were finding that they were using more tools. Now, why would they be using more tools? First of all, there's a greater incentive to save. As you're using more and more cloud services, you're spending more and more money. So naturally, you have more of an incentive to use these cost management tools. But secondly, as you use more and more cloud gets more embedded in the business. It's embedded in processes, the culture of the organization, and obviously enterprises want to make cost savings as time goes on an ongoing basis. And because of this, the tools are used more because they're embedded in day-to-day life of the organization. But why would organizations see growth in revenue and profitability as a result of cloud financial management? Well, I think a lot of it is the benefit in this culture of ongoing cost saving, but still allowing innovation to happen. So if you're a CFO, you have a huge budget to take control of, and you naturally don't want that budget to spiral out of control. But on the other side of things, you also want your company to be productive. You want the organization to be able to innovate, to scale, to take advantage of new opportunities as they arrive. And you don't want to hold back that agility by saying no one can spend any money or there's a huge range of approvals to go through. So it's almost as if CFM means that the developers, the operational teams, the IT department, the marketers, they can get on with their day jobs. They can continue to add value to the business, knowing that they are using the resources that are at the cheapest possible price, but they're still able to be agile and add value to the business. We also found that companies that were using CFM tools more regularly were also the users who were more mature with their use of cloud. So typically, those who had been using AWS for 5 years or greater were far more likely to use services such as CloudWatch, consolidated billing, and reserved instances than those who were relatively inexperienced. And they were doing so on a regular basis, so weekly or even daily in some circumstances. And the point is, CFM can't just be a one-time examination and resolution. It has to be an ongoing process that constantly seeks to take advantage of new services, take advantage of new options, giving developers and operations the ability to be agile, while also making sure on an ongoing basis that costs are kept to a minimum while value is enabled. And because of this, our sample of these 500 users were highly confident that public cloud is more cost effective than on-prem. And interestingly, this rises with the maturity of the enterprise with regards to their AWS usage. Now, of course, our survey sample are all enterprises who are using AWS. So it makes sense they believe the cloud is cheaper than on-prem. But still, almost 99% of enterprises who had used AWS for 5 years or greater believe that the public cloud economic proposition is greater than on-prem. So where does this leave us? What are my conclusions and recommendations for enterprises looking at the cloud and looking at CFM? Well, first of all, there's little to lose by using CFM practices. Most tools are free. There's a wealth of information on how to build them into your processes and even how to build the use of CFM into your culture. So there's little to lose by getting started and seeing what you can do. Most enterprises have seen improvements in cost base, revenue margins, and risk, and they've put these improvements as attributable to cloud financial management. Even dipping your toe into the water has benefits. Small, simple changes can realize cost and business value benefits. Over time, look to use more CFM practices and build them into your processes and culture, and you need to use them on a regular basis to get best value. And the more mature your company is with respect to CFM, the more benefits you're likely to realize. And as cloud use increases, CFM will become increasingly important because you'll be using cloud more. There will be a greater incentive to cost optimize it. And also there will be greater complexity as your business adds value. And now I'll hand over to Keith.
Thanks, Owen. Really great stuff here and lots of key learnings for us to take away. It's great for us to see customers who are implementing cloud financial management are realizing value that goes well beyond cost. And to me, I think it really reinforces the need to think about how companies are going about institutionalizing those types of best practices across their organization, certainly as part of their broader digital transformation goals. And we've talked a lot about the what and the why of cloud financial management already, and we have a few minutes left, so I want to quickly double click into the how, right? The how customers are realizing the benefits of cloud financial management through tools and services, right? And specifically how we at AWS can help customers start putting some of these best practices to work. And it's something that starts with getting the right visibility into your spend, right? And for customers, visibility is all about being able to understand what you're spending, who's spending it, and what we're getting for all that money, right? And to do that, our goal is to create a single source of truth, right? Establish a uniform view of the business through things like cost reporting and metrics tracking, right? Based on what makes sense for the business, right? The organizational structure, products, application, environments, or a combination of all those things. And so organizations want to be able to have a unified view of all their costs, right, by member accounts through a single pane of glass, right? And at the same time, they also want to be able to drill down into individual service costs or credits and do that by individual accounts. They want to be able to get a more granular view and integrate cost and usage information with other data sources or use their own analytics tools. Right, and by doing all these things, we're able to better manage our own metrics and KPIs, do things like establish chargeback models or drive cost transparency across the business, really with the end goal of helping ensure that each of our teams are accountable for our spend. So we have services like AWS Cost Explorer and cost and usage reports, cost allocation tags, and cost categories that can help customers who are really focused in this particular area. And we often hear customers who are asking us questions about how to view their spend, right? And we see two really common questions come up. And the first is really quite simply, what is causing our bill to increase? And AWS provides an out-of-the-box solution with Cost Explorer that can help us start to answer that question. And Cost Explorer really will enable us to organize and report our costs in a way that's meaningful to our business. It can help us do things like establish cost allocation models, track spending trends, create custom cost and usage reports, right? And ultimately dive deep into what's driving changes in our monthly spending, right? And so once we answer that question, the second question is commonly a follow-up to that question, which is, well, okay, well then who is driving the increased spend and usage, right? Whether that's a particular business unit, an application team, specific resources or individuals. And customers can improve cost reporting or establish cost allocation models based on logical grouping of cost and usage, right? Whether that's by account or tag or other logical grouping of our assets. And AWS actually launched a new service in April called Cost Categories, which can help customers do that type of logical grouping, right? To be able to create those custom reports that group cost and usage by dimensions such as account, by tag, by specific services or charge type. And then that costing data will then flow through our cost and usage reports and Cost Explorer, so customers can better report and investigate those trends by team or application. Cost optimization on its surface isn't overly complicated, right? It's all just about making sure we're not paying just for what we use, but really focusing on paying only for what we need. And while there could be hundreds of levers for customers to take advantage of minimizing their spend, right? Really at its core comes down to doing two things really well, right? And first, that's making sure we're using the right resources. And second is making sure we're using the right pricing models to then complement that usage. And so it starts by looking at our usage, looking across the breadth of our resources and identifying any over-provisioned or idle resources that can be right-sized or simply shut off. It really includes looking at the elasticity of our applications to make sure that our usage is scaling horizontally when we need the resources, but just as importantly, making sure that it's scaling back when we don't. And the best place for customers typically to start here is by looking at those over-provisioned or idle resources with utilization between 0 and 40%, really as those candidates for right-sizing or termination. Customers can leverage AWS native tools like Cost Explorer to help provide those recommendations based on your actual usage and take a lot of the legwork out of it for you. Cost Explorer right-sizing recommendations will generate recommendations by identifying those idle or underutilized instances and recommend lower cost instances that will still meet your utilization needs. So I personally find it helpful to start thinking about how I'm going to prioritize my effort, right? How I think about working my way through those recommendations based on where I'm going to get the biggest bang for my buck. All right, so to help with that, Cost Explorer will actually estimate the monthly savings for each of the recommendations that are provided, so we can then sort and stack and prioritize, which of those resources to tackle first. And then it's important for us to make sure that once we're comfortable with our usage, right, that we're using the right pricing models that then complement that usage, right? Meaning that AWS will provide different pricing models that are great for different types of applications or business needs. And when you start putting them all together, the impact can be really significant. So for example, in addition to our pay-as-you-go on-demand model for variable or unpredictable usage, right, most customers are familiar with our concept of reserved instances, right? Reserved instances will allow customers to make usage-based commitments for 1 to 3 years, and in exchange for that commitment, receive discounts of up to 72% off on-demand prices, which is really great. And we've heard, in addition to that, that customers above and beyond usage think it's easier to manage or plan based on spend levels. So last November, AWS announced AWS Savings Plan, which allows customers to commit to an hourly spend level across services like EC2, Lambda, Fargate, and receive that same great discount that they're used to with reserved instances. And so now we have commitment-based pricing for both types of customers, right? Depending on how you prefer to manage your business, right? Either committing to usage or by hourly spend levels. With AWS pricing recommendations, customers can receive tailored RI or savings plan purchase recommendations based on their historic usage and take a lot of the legwork out of it. Customers can select and tailor their recommendations based on what makes sense for their business, whether that's selecting the type of plan, the term commitment, or payment option. And once we refine that recommendation set, we can quickly and easily add those recommendations to our cart and purchase directly from the console. And then from there, customers can actually track their investment using Cost Explorer's RI and savings plans reports. Planning and forecasting in its most basic form is about how do we avoid getting surprised by our bill? But I think that the larger opportunity here is to start shifting our mindset away from how do we do a better job of reflecting cloud usage into our existing planning and budgeting processes, and instead start thinking about how do we actually use the cloud to improve business and financial predictability, right? Not just thinking about AWS as a change agent for technical digital transformation, but also financial. And organizations, especially larger enterprises who are used to conducting more static, long-term waterfall budgeting or forecasts, right, these enterprises are looking for ways to adapt these processes to be more cloud native. And when planning for future cloud spend, we recommend customers start by defining their metrics or KPIs, right? For example, in the most basic form is, what do you think the monthly run rate will be for your project or application? Right, and to answer that seemingly simple question, we need to make sure that our cloud usage is properly tagged with cost allocation tags, or that we're using cost categories to group our costs and usage together. And in that way, we can start calculating and tracking monthly costs of our projects using Cost Explorer or cost and usage reports. And once we've set our monthly budget target, then the next step is for us to start establishing a budget threshold using AWS Budgets. So customers can use AWS Budgets to set their targets for cost and usage, but can also use budgets for setting similar targets for reserved instance and savings plan utilization or coverage targets. So with our budget set, now we can start monitoring our progress in the budgets report dashboard and looking at things like actual versus budgeted or forecasting versus budgeted. So we can start improving our budgeting process or just simply know where we need to take action. So with budgets, customers can also create notification alerts so we can be informed either by email or SNS topic whenever we exceed or are forecasted to exceed our budget. As businesses grow and scale on AWS, business leaders are looking for ways to balance two seemingly opposing objectives. One is to give builders the freedom to experiment and innovate with cloud, and then also do that while maintaining control over cost, governance, and security. Right? We have a saying at Amazon, let builders build. And while it's important for us to foster innovation and speed, as an organizational leader, customers also don't want to be surprised by their bill, right? So it's important for us to think about, well, how do we let builders build, but also do so in a way that's consistent with the goals of the business, so we avoid those types of cost surprises. We found customers are successful typically doing that first by establishing centralized ownership of a center of excellence or a cloud business office, right? And while certain elements of cost management are certainly shared responsibilities across the organization, right, we find that that centralized team is a really important aspect to doing this well, to help us design policies and governance mechanisms, to help us implement and monitor the effort, and really start driving those best practices company-wide. And so using the AWS Billing Console, customers can easily do things like track our overall spend. We can view cost breakdown by service or account, and we can view monthly spend from last month, our current month, or our forecasted month. And from the billing console, customers can receive that kind of unified view of their spend in a single bill. And customers can then take it a step further by starting to establish rules for how they want to organize costs, share discount benefits associated with reserved instances, and lots of other control. And then finally, customers who are looking for additional access control can leverage services such as identity and access management to help us securely control individual and group access to AWS resources, and AWS organizations to help us enable more automatic policy-based account creation, management, and billing at scale. So Levon, I know there's a lot of great information out there for customers. Can you take a few minutes and just kind of walk us through some of those great resources that are out there to help customers that are looking to get started?
Thanks, Keith. Absolutely. So regardless of where our customers are on their cloud journeys, AWS provides support for each step of the way. So we provide deep dives and demonstrations for many of the AWS cost management services and features you just mentioned. We also work closely with customers in one-on-one settings to provide deeper technical and financial cost optimization assessments for customers looking to find ways to reduce their current AWS spend or find ways to avoid future AWS spend. One of the mechanisms we leverage in these one-on-one settings are our workshops, which we call FinHacks internally, that combine hands-on learning for customer finance and technology teams with assets that these teams can walk away with from the workshop and implement their own cost reduction plans. I'm also happy to share that just last month, in July, our AWS Training and Certification organization launched the first ever Cloud Financial Management for Builders course, which is a 3-day instructor-led course targeting technology stakeholders interested in building and deploying cost-aware architectures on AWS. And as part of that launch, the training team also published the first ever AWS ramp-up guide for cost management, which is a PDF file that contains a number of references to free digital training, classroom courses, videos, white papers, certifications, and other information that helps finance and technology stakeholders ramp up in the cloud financial management space. One other thing we offer is an event series called CFM Peer Connect, which is essentially a meetup for CFM practitioners. This year, we've had to pivot these events to a virtual offering, but the community has adapted really well just due to the sheer interest in talking to fellow CFM practitioners and building peer networks in this space. And if you're interested to learn more about our next offering, or if you'd like to add your organization to be notified when we have future events, please reach out to us. Finally, we work closely with our partner development teams and can provide introductions and demonstrations to third-party partner cost management tools as well. All of these services that I just mentioned can be requested through your AWS account team. So please ask them for an introduction to the AWS Cloud Economics team. And if you don't have an AWS account team, please use the link on this slide to submit a request to be introduced to the AWS Economics team. Note that we're going to share these slides after this webinar, so don't worry if you missed jotting down that link on this slide. In addition to the services and offerings I just talked about on the last slide, here are some additional links to resources that will help you on your cloud financial management journey. I do want to call out a couple of resources on this slide. First of all, the link to the 451 research paper that Owen walked us through on this webinar, that's available for viewing and download. I also wanted to call out the AWS well-architected cost optimization labs, which are hosted on GitHub and are an excellent resource for customers who want to learn by doing. And by that, I mean these are self-paced, self-contained, hands-on labs that you can follow directly from a website and provide step-by-step instructions on how to implement a number of best practices that we covered on this webinar, including things like monitoring your costs and usage, reporting, allocating costs, and resource right sizing. And with that said, I wanted to thank you for attending today's webinar, and we'd now like to open it up for a Q&A.